Thank you for staying tuned to Citizen TV, and it's time we want to speak to the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Interior Affairs and National Coordination of Government, Dr. Fred Matiangi. Thank you so much for your time to have this conversation. And I want us to begin because you're having this conversation in a time that the situation in the world is so peculiar, but also in the country, and that is to do with the situation with COVID-19. So many deaths, so many infections also being reported. How would you say the pandemic has affected the operations of the government, but more specifically within your docket of Interior National Coordination?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to meet and to do the interview. Thanks for having me. You know, the people working in the security sector are also human beings. We also get sick. We've had cases where some of our officers and some of our senior people have been taken ill. Since March, it's been hell. You know, trying to manage, for example, our prison service, our correctional services. We began, first of all, with the President's directive to lock them down. And then when we eased access to prisons a bit, we were hit one more time, especially in the remand prisons, because, you know, we're having new people coming in every day. Then we started a process of separating, you know, inmates, serving inmates from, you know, those who are in remand facilities, so that we make sure that we check the level of infection. And we've had cases where, you know, when some of our officials have been infected, the sad thing is that we've lost some of our officials. I am pained as I speak to you because we've lost some of our very strong chiefs in the country. Just 3 weeks ago, we buried Chief Karaoke in Nakuru, in what remains very frustrating to this day. And as you know, Karaoke was famously known as the tweeting chief, one of our strongest and most versatile administrators, whom we lost to COVID-19. And we've lost several other chiefs in other parts of the country and some other officials. And therefore, it's been a very trying time. Of course, not to mention the fact that because we have the responsibility of enforcing the containment measures, that too is another challenge. Our officers are always, you know, out at night, working so hard to enforce the containment measures. Unfortunately, of course, some of them in the process get infected, but we will stay the course. It is important that we enforce the measures, because, and then remind our people that this is a problem we are dealing with. It affects everyone. It doesn't care for position or class or anything else, and we're better off living the way we have been advised by our colleagues at the Ministry of Health. Observe the measures that we have been advised by health practitioners and experts, and see, hopefully, by the grace of God, that we'll probably get a vaccine soon enough to deal with the challenges we face. And
let's reflect on the role of your department or your ministry in as far as the enforcement of the containment measures. And as it began, there was what was seen by many as the police brutality. But now we are where we are, where you have to go and enforce regulations, including when people must close down the entertainment joints. What lessons have you learned during that journey that you would say would be more useful in containing this pandemic among the people?
Well, our enforcement has probably by far been, you know, the most successful, most humane, most consultative, and it involves everybody. I know that at the beginning, we were accused of having been a bit more aggressive and stiff and so on. I wouldn't use the words that you use, because, you know, people bandy words around. Sometimes they don't even actually understand the actual meaning of that. You know, when you talk about police brutality, for example, which people like flashing and throwing around and so on, you are talking about something totally different. That's not the case. To date, the last time I checked with the Inspector General of Police and our teams, we had 71 complaints across the country. We've been at this for nearly 10 months. And of those 71 cases, 16 cases had been investigated clearly, and the Inspector General had taken disciplinary action against the officers who were involved. And that was it. And then when you look at the scale of the operation across the country, 71 cases is, you know, almost it's less than 0.001% of the personnel involved in an operation. And when you have an operation of that magnitude, of course, you cannot rule out that certain things can happen and certain things can go wrong. And the question is not whether or not things go wrong. The question is what we do when things go wrong. You know, we have a very elaborate structure, security structure in the country, very institutionalized methods of doing this. And the police themselves have got standing orders. They have got a mechanism through which, you know, the Inspector General will call officers to account. And then in the event that, you know, officers have not been called to account, there is IPOA that you know, will deal with these issues. And at all times we have submitted to, you know, the observations, the advisory and the actions that IPOA has recommended when something has gone wrong. But look, I want to be, on this particular one, I want to say this for the record. Our police officers have done the best. And if you know the circumstances under which we have been working, when we started the initial phase of the containment measures, we were running a 24-hour shift, which means the team of police officers, we broke it into 3 shifts. Police officers were manning roadblocks for 8 hours straight, you know, across the country, and this was happening everywhere. Honestly, I think there's a way in which we also need to be understanding and need to be fair in some of the issues that we raise. And our police officers endured all that throughout the country. Our police officers worked on a 24-hour shift in most of the roadblocks where we were checking entry or access to the, for example, the capital metropolis. You know, police officers were working there. I went out some nights with my colleague CS Kawe, and frankly, I mean, to go to Limuru and hang out there all night, you know, with that cold and so on, we need to thank our police officers.
Right.
They have done us great.
And Waziri, now moving forward to where we are now, I remember the start of November, there was some entertainment joints that were caught on camera, of course, going beyond the curfew hours. What do you think, in as far as the containment measures and the adherence to the measures by the public? Is it satisfactory now?
Well, my view is it's satisfactory and we are building on it. But as in many cases, our president has been very clear on this, and he has spoken about it several times. And our Minister for Health has spoken himself hoarse about this. You know, this is about personal, individual responsibility. I do not know why people think the government is supposed to look after your personal health, even on matters that are simple, basic, common sense issues. We are being advised, spend less hours out there, you know, do less activity that brings you into contact with a lot of people, especially where you cannot observe social distancing. If you cannot observe social distancing when you are sober, chances are that when you are drunk, you will drop the guard, and so on and so forth. The government is doing this not because we're getting anything out of it. The Minister for Health is not doing this because he's getting anything out of it. It is because of the health of our people. So first of all, before we talk about police and containment measures of the police and the security sector, let us advise each other candidly and very sincerely that we need to take personal responsibility and behave and be a disciplined people. The societies that are going to survive this pandemic, and that's a fact of life, societies that are going to survive this pandemic are societies that have decided or are going to agree to be disciplined. Listen to what their leaders say, listen to what the experts say, and conduct themselves in a manner that checks the spread of the virus. But if we are going to be indisciplined and hope that we will not close the bar until the police officer shows up, and so on and so forth, we surely are going to die. It's as simple as that. So in my view, the containment measures are working. But we would be happier. Let's also tell our people the truth. We would be happier if our people were much more disciplined and our people were much more organized and more obedient and listened more to what they are being told. I mean, I have my colleagues in Ngao frustrated across the country, county commissioners, DCs, chiefs, and so on. We have been advised on what we should do with funerals. But people still want to have vigils, you know, have 1,000, 10,000 people. The only reason why the government is telling you, let's not keep bodies in the house, is so that at night when you're having the kesha and you are serving each other food and so on and so forth, as you are sleepy, you drop the guard. And, you know, then you have a super spreader.
Right, super spread event. And I want us to exit from this topic, but as we do that, there was the directive that civil servants who are aged 58 and above, or they have pre-existing conditions, they stay at home or work from home where they can. Is there a broader picture on how you're planning to go with the management of this pandemic in the public sector, bearing in mind that there's no sign that it's leaving the country anytime soon?
Well, you know, first of all, Sam, no one was expecting COVID-19. Let's begin from that point. We are actually planning as we go. We are planning on the go. To imagine that, you know, we would have had all plans and everything ready and so on and so forth. When we went for Christmas last year, the big plans we had when our Minister for Finance laid out the budget and took figures to Parliament and worked on all this, none of us was expecting a disaster of this magnitude. Now, we are faced with a situation which we are planning on as we go. Well, first of all, fortunately, in the security sector, the bulk of the people work there below the age of 58. So that one, I thank God. We don't have, you know, a lot of people are going to work away from their offices as a result. But again, when you look at the population of who are 58 years and above, it's not that big in the public service. Secondly, something else that I think as a country we should be grateful and we should, you know, thank God for and thank our government for is our investment in the ICT sector has actually borne fruit. The broadband footprint across the country is huge. Look, pause for a moment and think this way. The president is able to have a virtual special session of the Council of Governors, and all the 47 governors are able to come on board, from Turkana to Migori, from Lamu to Busia. All the 47 governors are able to come on board, which means that we have sufficient footprint across the country to sustain our new way of life, our new way of working, so that we do most of our meetings virtually, we do most of our activities, we can interact, and we can make decisions as government, we can consult the field, and the field can consult headquarters, you know, without too much physical movement, as it were. And then for this, we are grateful. So, do I see like government is going to be heavily affected in the delivery of services? Not much, really, because now we have embraced the new normal. We talk to county commissioners, we talk to regional commissioners, we're able to have virtual meetings, you know, and so on. And we're in the process of developing our own, even much more secure systems of communicating amongst ourselves across the country, which is very helpful. So I do not think that it's going to affect us that much. We'll be able to deliver services. If
you look at the private sector, Waziri, you'll see that there's a strain, and several firms are having to close down because of the lost business opportunities. Of course, the government is not in the business of doing business, but the fact of the matter is that the revenues are shrinking or may be affected in the long run. What is the thinking in government, especially with the wage bill that already was ballooned or was more than the 35% that has been advocated for? What is the thinking to ensure that you're able to sustain your expenditure in the recurrent sector?
All of us have to think differently, and all of us have to approach the challenges we face differently with a measure of honesty, and we have to live with the realities we have. I mean, it's not Kenya's economy that is suffering. The global economy is suffering. I mean, in fact, we are better than many, even on the continent, as it were, in terms of our growth and in terms of the way we are managing our revenue. Of course, revenues are of course, shrunk, as it were. My colleague, the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury, will soon be putting out the supplementary budget. And already you can see we are going to, you know, is going to have to cut down on recurrent especially. And of course, some of our development programs are going to be affected. It's a reality we have to deal with. And this has nothing to do with either government programs or, you know, us being unable to deal with the strain. It's a situation that we have to deal with right now. Look at how economies across the continent have been hit by this. So the question is, will government continue to provide services? The answer is yes. Are we going to adjust to our reality? Absolutely. We've already adjusted to most of our realities. We have saved a lot of money from our travel budget by reducing our travel budget to probably less than 5%. Even within the country, because there is no need to do that, and now you have to be very careful about it. International travel is becoming, you know, very difficult at this point in time. So it's a question of creatively looking at how we use, how this pandemic provides opportunities where we actually make some savings, like we are doing from the travel budget, and where we deploy those savings as we go along, so that we can sustain, even if it's just marginal growth, to be able to survive this phase, as it were. And we have seen that some of our sectors, actually, like in agriculture, the horticultural sector, for example, and the others, are still trudging on. They are doing well. So if we are able to sustain the level of work we are doing, for example, in development, in the construction sector, in road construction, and we are able to move along, we can sustain a certain level of marginal growth, as it were. I mean,
so
difficult times require...
Is there a possibility that, because we saw what happened in the cabinet, the announcement by President Kenyatta that himself and the deputy are going to take an 80% pay cut, yourselves, I think it was about 30%. Are we foreseeing a situation where the public service may have to take a salary cut?
Well, if it comes to that, my friend, so be it. I mean, we took a pay cut. As I said, these are tough times. Let's just face it. These are difficult times. And they are not difficult for Kenya alone. They are difficult for the globe. And they are not difficult for this government alone. They are difficult for other governments and so on. What we are required to do as leaders, and then the only way we can survive is if we are creative enough and we are able to adapt to the realities of our situation, and then try to swallow that bitter pill with our fellow Kenyans. I mean, when I meet people, even your own colleagues who work in media houses, who tell me, oh, we have a salary cut and so on, I tell them I too took a pay cut, and everyone has, even the president took a pay cut. I mean, no one loves taking a pay cut. I don't like it at all, but you see, that's the situation we find ourselves in. There's nothing we can do. So all of us are going to be called upon, all of us, to accept those extraordinary measures because we are dealing with extraordinary circumstances. It's not being done because we are happy-go-lucky characters. It's because we are in a situation and we have to survive and go through this situation, and that is what we are calling upon all our fellow Kenyans to do, whether they're in the public or private sectors, to look at that. I mean, it happens in your individual lives. If your circumstances change, you will relook at your budget again. That's the reality of the situation.
So for now, is there any specific timeline that you're looking at that you may have to do that, or the circumstance that you have to
who knows that? Who knows, Sam? Who knows when the COVID pandemic is going to come to an end? Who knows? Okay. Can you actually project and tell me by this time it will come to an end? Who knows? That's why these days when we have a conversation with people and say, oh, post-COVID, I tell them, when is that going to be? When is post-COVID? No one knows.
Right.
So as I said, it's a new reality. We are planning on the go. What we are all alert about is that we have to adapt to the circumstances. We have to be quick enough and make decisions as the circumstances and as the situation unfolds. And whatever anticipations we have, I mean, we have a command center, we have projections. Our health experts are telling us the things that we need to look at, and we are going to peak at this time and so on. We have stopped thinking that way. We are dealing with this as our reality for now and the foreseeable future. Okay,
let's talk about the impact of this pandemic, especially on the young people, because even before the pandemic, the level of unemployment was pretty high. It is getting worse. What is in the thinking of government, the strategy to be in a position to contain these shocks that are affecting the younger generation?
Even before COVID, what is very common about Africa, all of Africa, not just our country alone, I mean all of Africa, maybe we are affected more for reasons I'm going to explain. What is common about the whole of our continent is, the surge in the youth population, or what the economists are calling the youth bulge. Huge numbers of young people who are unemployed. In our circumstances, we have a special situation because we have been a peaceful country for nearly 6 decades. Our education system has run on without any interruption for almost 6 decades, and nearly 6 decades as well, which means that from generation to generation, we have educated our population throughout seamlessly without any interruption. Now, the resultant effect of that is that you have huge numbers of very well-educated young people who are not in gainful employment, as it were, and the economy is not growing at the rate at which it can absorb them, as it were. It's a challenge. First of all, as I said, it's a challenge that affects, the whole of this continent. Us spread slightly more differently than others because of the reasons I've given. But you see, even before COVID, the intention of this government, and it has been articulated times without number by His Excellency our President, is to pour resources in investing and improving all our sectors so that we can attract manufacturing, we can attract investment into our country, we can attract foreign direct investment and so on, because jobs are not created by the government directly. Government cannot create enough jobs for all its people. Jobs are created by private sector investment. They are created by people bringing resources to invest in the country, and then we prepare our youth both for our market and also so that we can export some of our labor out of the country. I mean, countries like Philippines, India, and the rest have also succeeded because they're able to export their labor out of the country, because all the jobs we need may not necessarily be within our borders. Some of them may be in Doha, in Dubai, in all these places. So in investing heavily, for example, in technical training, the government is having an eye on the international labor market, as it were, because this is where the skills may be needed, and this is where we have put a lot of resources. I mean, the expansion of the technical training sector alone since 2013, since President Kenyatta came to power, is exponential, as it were. The number of people we have trained out there. In the expanding sectors that are facilitative to investment, the energy sector, for example, road infrastructure, several aspects of the communication infrastructure. All this is intended to create an enabling environment for investment, because that investment is what's going to provide jobs for our people. And then of course, in addition to that, providing an enabling framework through easily accessed credit to support the youth, government going out of its way through even procurement preserved for the youth and women and people living with disabilities. I mean, our president adopted an all-of-the-above approach, I mean, he threw everything at this and said we must do everything we can. Jobs, jobs, jobs. Everything we can to ensure that we get jobs for our young people. Whether it is going to involve in transforming the land tenure system in the country, so that, you issue title deeds, so that through that people are able to access credit, and that credit will lead to investment, and that's how people are going to be employed. So what I'm calling an all-of-the-above approach by our president has paid dividends. We can see clearly that there are levels of growth. Unfortunately, as it is, not as fast as we would love to, because, the slowdown is global. The challenges that have happened, in terms of the economic slowdown, the growth has been fairly slow globally across the board. Then, of course, we are struck by this pandemic, which affects everybody, as it were. But I don't give up. I am grateful because we have laid an unprecedented and unequaled and parallel framework in this country to be probably the most active participant in economic growth in the region. So if, by the grace of God, and we hope we go over this crisis, and as soon as we go over this crisis, we will be at a much better place to take full advantage of all opportunities available. Have you asked yourself the question, for example, Sam, why is it that all the IT companies, big global companies, all of them, including doing their regional business, they operate from Nairobi? Because of the enabling environment. If you look at our rating on the World Bank index on ease of doing business, how we have dramatically changed. The president insisted that we pull all the stops, we remove all the institutional barriers, statutory and legal inhibitions to investment and to business, and look at how we have done. So across the board, including enacting enabling legislation, including consolidating institutional action so that we make it much easier for investment.
Right.
The president has laid a solid foundation for growth and a solid foundation for increased FDI. And once that happens, as we go along, what that means in actual fact is jobs. When the French government, or a French company, sorry, not government, when a French investment or infrastructure company gets into the largest infrastructure PPP on the continent, on this Lironi Mausami Road, I mean, when that project begins, that means money, first of all, on its own. But secondly, it means jobs. Then it means opening up that part of our country. It means fastening our interaction within the region. So
unfortunately, our rate of expansion of providing those opportunities is not matching the rate of learners who are graduating from different institutions.
Absolutely.
And so we have heard you before saying that we need to handle the question of the youth in a more programmatic way. What are your fears? Because there is the political season that will start very soon. What are your fears? Because you have more informed young people, more educated, but economically they still feel a bit left behind.
Our fears as government have been articulated before by our president, and we have seen it. When there are challenges, there are people who look for easy answers. radicalization of the youth population is what we fear. We are in a very precarious region security-wise. Numbers of our desperate youth may be tempted to join ranks of radical terrorist organizations and so on and so forth. That is the fear we have. But you see, that is why we've been saying every time, at every turn and bend, the government has put together all these methods and all these policies because we know and we are aware that that is the one thing that must be addressed if we are going to develop our country. That's why I'm saying I'm calling it an all-of-the-above approach. Our president has put in that all-of-the-above approach to ensure that we absorb as many of our youth and as many of our young people as possible in employment, or they are able to make investments, or they are able to engage in business. And we are removing all barriers for foreign direct investment so that it can create employment opportunities. And then we look at how we can expand our regional business network and our regional trade frameworks. The government is engaged in two serious trade negotiations simultaneously. You know, we've just concluded a major trade discussion with the UK. We are now deep in the USFTA discussions, you know, and all this is intended to create opportunities everywhere you go. If we have 5, 6, 7, 8 American companies investing in our country, they are going to employ our young people. So yes, we have the fears, but I am very hopeful myself that we are just about to get to the turn. And the turn is that we are just about to turn the corner. That we have laid down the framework and the infrastructure is now completely in place for you know, our youth talent and youth opportunity. I look at it as our youth opportunity to thrive, because we have that unique opportunity of having huge numbers of young people who are very well educated, very well skilled, and you know, trained and ready to work. I mean, that's why companies that are outsourcing, they come to look for young people from Kenya, because we have a better, stronger education system where we teach our young people to speak good English. They can work for Indian companies and British companies, and that's not very common in the region. Right. So we have the fears, we do some about temptations by political leaders, or you know, some people to radicalize our youth, to mobilize our youth, you know, and then sometimes take advantage of harnessing negative energy. But I am hopeful that as we go along, some of these policies are bearing fruit, and slowly but surely a lot of our young people will notice clearly that better days lie ahead of them. Right. And you know, you don't destroy your better days ahead by engaging in wrong things today, as it were. That's why we are fighting in the security sector, very heavily fighting drug trafficking, for example, consumption of illicit alcohol and so on, because the people are targeted. We are going to lose out more in what probably is the unique and different advantage we have as a country of having a huge population of young, well-educated and able people. Right. Yeah. Waziri, I want us to take a short break, but when we return, we'll be talking about the state of the security in the country, as well as the Huduma Namba, which we are told is just about to be rolled out in the month of December, after the break.